Hello everyone and welcome to my first video on how to set up your force feedback in ACC. I've been playing around with ACC for a while and I actually never felt that I got the proper understanding of how the car was reacting under braking and cornering. It just felt very weird and unnatural. After a lot of research, I was able to find the correct settings and set up my wheelbase properly, and I'm here to help you do so. At the end of the video, I will be talking a little bit more about the SimuCube 2 Pro. But for now, I'm just going to focus on any wheelbase, how to set up your force feedback properly, make sure that you're getting the right data from the sim, and then we're going to talk about settings and fine-tuning, maybe in another video as well. But today I just want to help you set up your force feedback. Let's jump right into that. The big question is, how do you make sure that you're actually getting the correct signal and physics from the sim to your wheelbase? So there are two parts to that. We have the settings in game and we have the settings in your driver, which in my case is the true drive from SimuCube. Yours could be the Thrustmaster, Logitech driver, or Fanatec. You really need to go under your settings and turn off everything. Just turn off all the filters, all the signal processes, and just make sure that everything is turned off or put to 0. The only thing you really want to set up is your wheel range or steering range. And just make sure that it matches what's on the sim. So it could be 900, 1080, or 540. It really doesn't matter as long as it matches the sim. And the way you can verify that is go under your controls and make sure that your steering lock is set to match your driver setting. And what you need to do is go and drive and make sure that when you're moving your wheel, it matches the movement of the wheel in the sim. So you're basically getting the same range of motion in the sim. So that's the first thing you want to do. Once you're done with that, go under your controls and you can play around with your gains. If you have a belt driven wheel, start with about 50. I'll tell you exactly how you set that up because it really depends on clipping. You really want to go with the highest gain you can get without having too much clipping. And direct drive wheels, you should be okay going maybe up until 100, while you might have some clipping in like very heavy load situations, like maybe through erosion spa or going over curbs. You might get some flickering clipping, which is fine because that's not really affecting your detail that much. However, I found that like 100 or 90 are too heavy, and especially in long races, it's just going to be too exhausting. To me, in the SimuCube 2 Pro, 75 was about like the sweet spot. Depends on how you like your steering. I would say go as much as you can, as long as you don't have clipping, because you're going to get more detail. You're just going to get more feedback of what's happening to the car. It's really going to help you out. With belt driven wheels, maybe you want to start at like 50, maybe even a little less, because belt driven wheels are probably going to clip closer to like 50 or 40, but again, depends on the wheel and the torque it has. Leave everything else as default, minimum force as default, road effects, everything like that. Just make sure that you have your steer lock as we mentioned, and go for a drive. So what you need to do is jump into the car and start driving. And while you do that, just look at the bottom right corner of your screen. This is where your clipping is, or force feedback is, and you will be able to see if your force feedback signal is clipping. If it's only flickering under very heavy loads or maybe going over curbs, then you have a little bit of a flicker. That's okay. That's not going to affect your force feedback that much, and you're not losing as much detail. If you have clipping, then you need to dial it down. If you don't, then I would suggest that you go as high as you can. Because I dropped it to 50 now, I'm not really feeling what the car is doing. And practically every profile I've seen online for ACC had their settings set up at like 40 or 50, and a direct drive wheel, you don't want that. So let's just go back here under options, controls, and I'll set mine back to 75. And just by doing that, and if I don't play around with any other settings, after doing that and going with like a 75 gain range, I have a much better understanding of how the car handles, how it feels under braking, cornering. You can counter steer, you can react to what the car's body is doing under braking and cornering. It's just a completely different world. Like, you have no idea how this is gonna help you if you don't have your right settings. This is really gonna help you out a lot. The second thing you want to eliminate is oscillation. So if I go under my settings here and I have dampening and friction at 0, Again, your settings might be a little bit different, but I'll just put everything to 0 right here. And get your car up to about like 150 kilometers per hour. A little less, a little more is okay, but kind of within that same range. And get to a straight line speed. Just hold your speed steady and release the wheel and see if it oscillates. You probably have to kind of push it a little bit. Oh wow, that goes crazy. And if you just give it a little bit of a push, it oscillates, as you can see. So this is the whole purpose of dampening. So ACC recommends that you first leave your dampening or damper and dynamic damping at 50 and 100. So these are the default settings. Start with your driver settings. And I like to start adding damping up until a point where you completely eliminated that oscillation. Keep in mind, if you add dampening that's way higher than necessary, wheel is not going to give you the proper feedback when the car starts to rotate. So what happens is that the car oversteers and your steering wheel doesn't go the other way, doesn't counter a little bit automatically to help you understand what's going on with the wheels. So as you can see here, if I go ahead and get to the straight line there, keep in mind I didn't change any of the other settings, just added 7% of dampening. Or actually, in that case, I added way too much just to show you. So now I eliminated that kind of oscillation. See, the steering wheel just immediately stops once I push it like that. So I have no oscillation whatsoever. However, if I turn down or turn off traction control and the car starts to spin, that counter steering was too late for me to even understand it or feel it. What you need to do is, again, just raise it very slightly until you completely eliminate oscillation. That's the only thing you need to do. Just don't go above that. That should be completely fine. In the SimuCube 2 Pro, 7% was completely eliminating my oscillation, and at the same time I still get the proper feedback from the car in case it starts to rotate or lose traction. Oh, now I'm understeering a little bit, but there you go. It just happened faster. You get the idea. Obviously I didn't catch that. That counter steer was more natural, was just more intuitive. So if the car loses traction, obviously you don't drive these cars with like 0 or no traction. So especially with cold tires like that. But you basically have a little bit of that kind of initial reaction is quick and fast so that you're able to react to it. So the other thing you need to make sure of is that you need to have a little bit of a friction or feeling when the car is steady, and if I start to move my steering wheel, I have 0 friction. So like it's just moving in freely as if my force feedback is completely turned off. So you don't want that. What you need to do then is, again, that could differ from one driver to another. In SimuCube, it's called friction. I believe it's kind of the same in Fanatic. I haven't had a Fanatic wheel in a while. But basically, this will give you a little bit of a friction feeling of the steering when the car is steady on the ground. And that's also going to help you have a more steady feeling in the car as it drives at higher speeds. So just add a little bit of friction. Again, that's according to your liking. What you really need to do is set up your damper to eliminate oscillation and set up your force feedback or gain to eliminate clipping. Those two things are the most important things. Other than that, everything else could be played around with. I would recommend that you just set it up that way first. Even without the friction, just set up your damping and your gain properly. Turn off everything else. Trust me, you're really gonna enjoy that. Lots of people play around with different profiles and they keep sharing profiles. I think that's the right way to do it with ACC. Just turn off all the filters, turn off all signal processes. I created this profile and shared it under my name in SimuCube's True Drive. If you guys want that and you use a SimuCube 2 drive, you can SimuCube 2. You can just go under ACC recommended settings. That's how I named it. Should be able to find the profile and use it from here. So what I would recommend that you do is that you should drive the car. Your favorite car, doesn't really matter. Just drive it as much as you can before you play around with any settings. Don't play around with the gain as well, switching between cars. In case you need a little bit more adjustment, you can always play around with the user force feedback settings for each car, so you can just adjust it. In my case, I have it to the numerical plus and minus buttons on my keyboard. You can set it up to anything that you want. If you go under your settings, you can find force feedback increase gain and force feedback decrease gain, and that applies only to the car that you're driving. So if I go here and I just click on those numerical buttons that I have it set up, you can see that defaults is 1, which matches the 1-to-1. So basically that would be 75 gain, 75% gain. But I can choose to increase that if I feel that it's too light for this specific car, or go a little lower. What you need to adjust in your global settings is the one that we discussed to eliminate force feedback clipping, but basically maximize the gain that you can go for according to your wheelbase, and then adjust for each car. Keep in mind that every time you do those changes in the car, it gets completely saved to each car uniquely, so you won't have to do that every time you jump into a different car. So that's been it for this video. I hope you guys find that useful and it hopefully helps you out. I believe that really this worked very well for me. I was finally able to enjoy Assetto Corsa or ACC and really have fun racing it like I did with other sims, and I can really relate to the car, and obviously my lap times are much faster and I'm way more consistent that way. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'll be happy to help you out with anything, and probably I'm going to be making another video to discuss more details and as I go through my findings. If you guys like that, please let me know, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers, and I'll see you on the track.